On the wall of Birmingham's oldest tea room hangs a faded photograph. Its edges have yellowed, its colors nearly erased by time. Thousands have seen it, but almost no one has ever stopped to truly look. Beneath it, a small plaque reads, Operation Desert Storm, 1991. For the regulars, that photo had become invisible, just another piece of the furniture. But that evening, someone new noticed. SAS Operative Marcus had wandered into the tea room after a long day of training. His friends wanted a noisy pub, but Marcus wanted silence, a place where the chaos in his head could settle. He ordered his tea and chose a corner seat. Instead of reaching for his phone, his eyes began to travel across the walls. Old football photos, wedding snapshots, yellowing newspaper clippings, all silent witnesses of the neighborhood's history. And then his gaze stopped. The Desert Storm photo. 6 young soldiers stood shoulder to shoulder, uniforms crisp, expressions sharp with determination. Their eyes carried courage, duty, and something else Marcus knew well, resolve forged in fire. At first glance, it was just another military portrait. But as Marcus leaned closer, his pulse quickened. One face pulled him in. The eyes, the nose, the jawline uncannily familiar. He frowned. Where had he seen that face before? A soldier in 1991 would now be an older man. But who? A soft cough broke the silence. Marcus turned. In the far corner sat an elderly man, tea in hand, newspaper open. He seemed part of the furniture too, so calm, so unnoticed. The server moved around him with quiet respect, as though he was more than just a customer. Marcus glanced back at the photo, then at the man. Back again. His breath caught. The resemblance was undeniable. The same lines, the same bone structure. Time may change a man, but certain features never vanish. Marcus had been trained to recognize faces, and this was no coincidence. Could it be? Was a real Desert Storm veteran sitting only a few steps away, hidden in plain sight for decades? The old man finished his tea, placed coins neatly on the table, and stood. "Good evening, Chief," said Thomas the server with unusual respect. The man nodded, silent, and walked out into the night. Marcus sat frozen. His mind raced. 30 years, and no one had asked who this man really was. No one had noticed the striking resemblance to the soldier in that forgotten photo. Thomas muttered while wiping the counter. "Comes here every night, 30 years straight. Quiet as they come. Never a problem. Our most peaceful customer." Peaceful? Or hiding a story the world had long forgotten? The following evening, Marcus found himself hurrying back to the tea room. He had barely slept the night before the same questions had chased him until dawn. Was the resemblance in that photograph real? Or was his mind simply playing tricks on him? For all his SAS training in facial recognition, this time it wasn't just professional instinct. It was personal. The tea room looked the same when he pushed the door open. The smell of fresh brewed tea. Thomas behind the counter. A few locals leaning over their dominoes. The corner table, however, was empty. The old man hadn't arrived yet. Marcus took his seat, eyes fixed on the door, waiting. At precisely 6:15, the bell chimed. The man entered steady steps, modest clothes, dark trousers, clean shirt, an old cardigan. To anyone else, he was just another pensioner, but Marcus's trained eyes saw more. The man slid into his usual seat, nodded at Thomas, and within moments tea and a newspaper were before him. The routine began, yet beneath the calm surface something else was happening. Marcus noticed it at once. The posture upright, controlled, never slouching. His chair angled so the door remained in view, his line of sight unobstructed. No ordinary customer cared that much about exit points. Even the way he handled the newspaper betrayed him. Before turning a page, his gaze swept the room in quick, sharp scans. A fraction of a second, barely noticeable. But Marcus recognized it instantly. That was training. And then the teacup. He held it in his left hand, though the tremor of his movements showed he wasn't left-handed. His right hand stayed loose on the table. Dominant hand, free ready. A soldier's reflex. Ingrained after years of caution, Marcus's suspicions solidified. This man wasn't merely a veteran. He still carried the habits of the field. Half an hour passed before the man rose, placed coins on the table, and gave his quiet nod to Thomas. Same calm pace, same control. But this time, Marcus didn't just watch. He followed. At a careful distance, he tracked the man through the narrow streets. The walk was steady, measured. Shoulders square, head lifted. His age betrayed only by the gray in his hair. Every so often, he paused, not randomly, but always at vantage points. Street corners, crossroads, places with a clear view in multiple directions. Always calculating, always aware. Marcus followed until the man reached an old brick apartment block, one of the council housing units. He disappeared into door number 47 without looking back. Marcus noted it carefully. He now knew where the man lived, but the question that burned in his mind remained. Was this really the soldier from the photograph? Back at his flat, Marcus dove into research. Desert Storm, 1991. Missing soldiers, medalists, veteran names. Hours slipped by as he sifted through fragmentary archives. Official records were sparse. Many details still classified. But one fact became clear. Most of the men who served had survived, retired, and scattered into quiet lives. The next evening, Marcus returned to the tea room once more. This time, he wasn't waiting for the man. He was waiting for Thomas. If anyone knew more, it was the tea server who had been greeting that customer for 30 years. Marcus picked up his tea, leaned casually on the counter, and began to speak. Thomas had been running the tea room for 40 years, inheriting it from his father, and planning eventually to pass it on to his own son. New faces in the neighborhood always sparked curiosity, but Marcus's questions were different. He wasn't asking about local gossip, he wanted details about the quiet man in the corner. Albert, you mean? Thomas asked, stirring the tea thoughtfully. Good man. Been coming here for 30 years, never a bother. Pays his tea, reads his paper, leaves. Our most peaceful customer. He paused, then added, but he doesn't talk much. Just greetings, thanks. Nothing about his private life. Marcus noted the name, Albert. Finally, at least he had that. And his age? He asked, indirectly. Thomas considered. Probably around 70. Maybe a little younger. Strong for his age, walks upright. Some 50-year-olds aren't as fit as him. The tea room was quiet at this hour. Thomas leaned closer, lowering his voice. Lives on a pension, I suppose. Clothes simple but tidy. Comes the same days, same hours. Disciplined. Must have military training, you can see it in his posture. That phrase echoed in Marcus's mind. He wasn't alone in noticing the military bearing. How can you tell? He asked. Thomas chuckled softly. When you get old enough, son, you learn to read people. His posture, his walk, the way he sits orderly, controlled. That's military bearing. Never talks about his past? Marcus probed further. Thomas shook his head. Never. Don't know family, hometown, former work. We just call him Albert. But he's a good man. Last year, there was a fight here. He stopped it without raising his voice, calmly. Marcus leaned in. Breaking up fights quietly was a sign of leadership and training. How exactly? He asked. Thomas explained. Two young lads started arguing, then got physical. Albert stood up, stepped between them, said nothing. Yet everyone froze. Authority without words. And then? Marcus pressed. Thomas smiled, recalling the moment. The lad sat down, apologized. Albert returned to his table, picked up his paper, acted as if nothing happened. From that day, everyone treated him with more respect. Nobody knew who he really was, but it was obvious he was important. Marcus felt a chill of certainty. This was no ordinary pensioner. But which unit? Desert Storm? He needed more. Does he have friends visit? He asked. Thomas shook his head. No, always alone. But sometimes old acquaintances come, recognize him. Last month, an elderly man approached, visibly shocked. They exchanged a few words, then parted. The visitor was affected, almost reverent, important. Others noticed him too. Do you know him? Marcus asked. No, Thomas replied. Only once. But the respect was instant, almost like standing at attention. The door chimed. Albert entered, calm and measured. Thomas fell silent, preparing his tea. Marcus returned to his corner but listened intently. Welcome, Albert, Thomas said softly. The man nodded, walked to his table. Every step, every motion, controlled, observant, disciplined, not ordinary. Thomas set down the tea quietly. The usual, he said. Albert took it, lifted his newspaper, and settled in. Routine resumed, yet Marcus's mind raced. He now had more pieces. A man named Albert, about 70, carrying the unmistakable mark of military life. And very likely the same young soldier from the photograph on the wall. Marcus had been observing Albert for 3 days now. Every evening, same time, same table, same tea, same newspaper. But Marcus wasn't just looking, he was studying. That was no ordinary pensioner. The way Albert moved, his posture, his constant scanning of the room, all signs of military training. And the resemblance to the young soldier in the photograph was impossible to ignore. On the 4th evening, Marcus finally gathered courage. His heart thudded as he approached Albert, who was calmly sipping tea. The man looked up, eyes alert, but not hostile. A subtle question in their depth. Marcus swallowed. Excuse me, he began. I'm Marcus. I'm new to the neighborhood. I really like this tea room. Albert nodded, voice deep and steady. Welcome, lad. He introduced himself simply. That was all. Yet Marcus sensed an invitation in that calm acknowledgement. Conversation had begun. The area's lovely, Marcus said, glancing at the walls. So rich in history. Albert followed his gaze, eyes lingering on the Desert Storm photograph, expression unreadable. He didn't flinch, didn't give anything away. Marcus probed further. I wonder where the soldiers in that photograph are now. Albert studied the photo, silence stretching. Then, quietly, some are here, some far away, and some no longer with us. A faint sadness shadowed his voice. Marcus's pulse quickened. This was a clue he knew something about the photograph, perhaps more than anyone expected. Marcus leaned slightly closer. Did you ever serve? In the military? Albert paused, looking at him steadily. Time seemed to stretch. Marcus worried he'd overstepped, but then Albert answered, Every British man serves his country, lad. Evading, yet revealing something. Marcus tried to build trust. I'm with the SAS. Albert's eyes flickered a spark. SAS? He said. Interest, a subtle gravity in his tone. Tough duty, must be careful. Do you go on operations? Marcus noted the knowledge in his questions. Yes, training ongoing, he replied. Albert nodded knowingly. Learning from an experienced instructor is survival. Next to an untrained one, you die. Marcus froze. How could he know such specifics? How do you know this? He asked. Albert sipped his tea casually. Radio, television. But Marcus sensed there was more. My grandfather was also a soldier. Marcus tried a new approach. Fought in the Falklands. Never spoke of it, but there was always something in his eyes. Albert's eyes misted. The Falklands, he whispered. Marcus pressed. Desert Storm must have been similar. Albert's hand trembled around his cup. Desert Storm, he murmured, then regained composure. Difficult times, but necessary. That was enough. Marcus knew now Albert had first-hand experience. Not a historian's account, but a survivor's memory. Those soldiers were heroes, Marcus said softly. Albert shook his head. Not heroes, lad. Just did our duty. Humility, Marcus noted. Typical of veterans. A Desert Storm survivor was sitting in front of him. Yet Albert remained cautious. Revealing only fragments, Marcus shifted the subject gently. You must have been coming here for a long time. Albert nodded. 30 years, quiet place, clears the mind. Marcus understood people seeking peace had endured heavy burdens. The next evening, Marcus headed to the tea house again, without hesitation. Last night's conversation had melted the ice. Albert had opened up a little, showing signs of trust. When Marcus approached the table, Albert lifted his head and gave a slight smile. It was a good sign. Welcome back, son, the old man said. Marcus sat across from him. May I join you? He asked. Albert gestured with his hand in invitation. That simple motion surprised Marcus. The man was more open and friendly than he had expected. How's the SAS training going? Albert asked. Marcus's heart leapt with joy. There was genuine interest. Tough, but instructive, he said. The hardest part is the psychological pressure. Physical endurance goes only so far. The real test is the mind. Albert nodded with understanding. You're right. The body tires and recovers, but the mind remembers everything. His eyes drifted off, as if lost in his own memories. Marcus seized the chance. Have things like that happen to you too? He asked carefully. Albert stayed silent for a long time. He sipped his tea, folded his newspaper. Marcus thought he wouldn't speak, but then he began. It was the summer of 1991, he said slowly. I was 19. I didn't know what war, what death was. They just said national duty, and we went. His voice carried deep sorrow. Marcus held his breath. The man was opening his past. Were you in Desert Storm? Marcus asked, almost whispering. Albert nodded. We launched the ground offensive on February 24th. 6 of us, both excited and terrified. We didn't know what was coming. He closed his eyes. What happened then? Marcus's voice trembled. The story was both fascinating and haunting. We learned the truth, Albert said with a bitter smile. War wasn't like the movies. It was far more complex, far more painful. Now Marcus was certain. He was sitting across from a real Desert Storm veteran. The young soldier in the photo was him. He wanted more details. What were your friends like? He asked. They were good kids. All went for their country. From William to James, they shared the same dreams. Albert's voice dropped. But not all came back. Of 6, only 3 remained. The revelation shook Marcus. Half the men were gone. I'm so sorry, he said sincerely. Albert placed his hand on the table. Marcus noticed the old scars on his fingers, deep, healed, yet still visible lines. Don't grieve, son. They did their duty. They became heroes. We stayed. We carried on. Pride and sorrow mingled. But you can't forget. Even if 45 years pass, Marcus's eyes welled up. He was face to face with a man who had carried pain for decades. Did you inform their families? He asked. Albert nodded. Of course. But how do you tell a mother how her son died? How do you describe his final moments? That must have been hard, Marcus said. The hardest, Albert replied. But it had to be done. To deliver our friends' last words to their families, to keep their memory alive. He paused. Maybe that's why I never married. The burden was too heavy. The confession struck Marcus deeply. The man had carried this weight his whole life. The grief of loss. The responsibility of promises kept. How do you feel now? He asked. At peace, Albert said calmly. I did my duty. I kept my friends' trust. I looked after their families. Now, I'm old. I'm tired. But my conscience is clear. Marcus finally understood. Why he came here every evening. Why he sat in silence. The tea house was his refuge. A sacred place where he made peace with his memories. Have you told this story before? Marcus asked. Albert shook his head. No, son. For the first time. Maybe the time has come. Maybe you're the right one. Those words warmed Marcus's heart. He had earned his trust. These stories must not be forgotten, he said firmly. Future generations must know. Albert looked at him for a long moment. You're right, son. If those who live through history don't tell it, who will? While Marcus and Albert were talking, the other customers in the tea house were listening intently. Even though voices were kept low, the atmosphere had shifted. Thomas watched curiously from behind the counter. The two old men at the corner table glanced over from time to time. There was a different energy in the air. As Albert spoke, the deep emotion in his voice spread throughout the room. Marcus's eyes had welled up, and the respect and care in his questions were obvious. This wasn't an ordinary conversation. It was a moment of witnessing history. Thomas couldn't resist, and came closer. Albert, I don't mean to intrude, he said in a hesitant voice. I caught part of your story. Were you really in Desert Storm? Albert slowly nodded. Thomas's eyes lit up. My God, I've seen you every day for 30 years. I never realized. From that moment, the atmosphere in the tea house completely changed. The old men playing dominoes left their table and came over. One asked excitedly, when I joined the army, some of the soldiers had just returned from the Gulf. They always told heroic stories. Were you really there too? Albert felt a little uneasy with the attention. It wasn't easy to have a hidden identity revealed after so many years, but the respectful tone of those around him eased his discomfort. Yes, boys, I was there. But we weren't heroes. We were just doing our duty. Thomas waved his hand eagerly. Wait, he said, pointing to the Desert Storm photo on the tea room wall. Are you one of the soldiers in this picture? Albert looked at it for a long time. Marcus's heart was racing. The truth was about to surface. Second from the left, Albert said quietly. Everyone turned to the photo. The resemblance was striking even after 45 years. The same eyes, the same jawline. Thomas covered his mouth with his hand. My God, we've been having tea with a hero for 30 years. I'm not a hero, Albert repeated. But there was no point in protesting anymore. Everyone now looked at him differently. Their faces carried respect, admiration, and a hint of shame. For years, they hadn't realized a veteran had been sitting among them. One of the domino players said, Albert, we're so sorry. If we'd known, we would have treated you differently. Albert waved his hand. Don't be sorry. That's exactly why I never told anyone. I wanted you to treat me normally, but being normal was no longer possible. Everyone now knew who he was, and the news spread like ripples in water. Thomas immediately pulled out his phone. I'll tell my son, he said. He's in the army, he'll be thrilled. No, don't do that, Albert said anxiously. Why tell everyone? But Thomas wasn't listening. Albert, you're our hero. People need to know this. The young must learn what you lived through. As Marcus watched, he thought about his own role. He was the one who had uncovered the story, but now things were spinning out of control. Albert was uneasy. The identity he had hidden for decades was suddenly known to everyone. Just then, the tea room door opened. A young man entered. It was Thomas's son, Stephen, clearly called by his father. He walked straight to Albert's table and kissed his hand. Uncle Albert, it's a great honor. If we stand here today, it's thanks to men like you. Albert was deeply uncomfortable. Get up, son. What are you doing? He said. But Stephen, with an emotional voice, replied, No, uncle. It's necessary. We kissed the ground you walked on. The scene moved the other customers as well. One of the old men stood up and saluted. Then another followed. Soon everyone in the tea room was on their feet, paying their respects to Albert. With teary eyes, Albert said in a trembling voice, Children, you embarrass me. I did all this for you, for the country, for all of you. Marcus understood. This wasn't just a personal story, it was society rediscovering forgotten values. Silent heroes like Albert were everywhere, just waiting to be recognized. Uncle Albert, Marcus said, your story is precious. More people should know. Albert looked at him. What do you mean, son? Marcus thought. The story deserved to reach wider audiences, but Albert's privacy had to be respected. If you allow it, I can share your story, but only the way you want. Thomas broke in. Albert, this story must not be forgotten. The young need to learn about your sacrifice. The other customers agreed. Albert thought for a long time. All right, he said at last. But I have one condition. The names of my fallen friends must also be remembered. They must not be forgotten. After that evening, everything in the tea house changed. Albert was no longer just the quiet man at the corner table. Everyone knew him now, showed him respect. But most importantly, his story was no longer forgotten. The resemblance Marcus had noticed on the very first day had uncovered a secret hidden for 45 years. That weekend, at Thomas's invitation, a small gathering was held in the tea house. The neighborhood wanted to see its hero from the past. At first, Albert hesitated, but in the end, he agreed. He had only one condition. His fallen comrades must also be remembered. That day, the tea house was overflowing. Not only the locals, but also veterans from faraway towns had come. The story Marcus had shared had spread quickly on social media, reaching Desert Storm veterans across the country. Old soldiers who had once known Albert reunited after 45 years. Robert, is that you? Albert asked when he saw an old man, his eyes filled with tears. I thought you were dead. Robert smiled. So did I. Where have we been all these years? The two old friends embraced. Everyone in the tea house was moved to witness such a reunion. Robert asked, Albert, you never married? Albert shook his head. I couldn't, Robert. My friends were always on my mind. I had promised to look after their families. There was no time left for myself. Those words struck Marcus deeply. Albert had lived a life devoted to the families of his fallen comrades. What a sacrifice. Uncle Albert, Marcus said, you're not only a true hero, you're a true human being. That's right, son, Robert said. Albert was always like this, always thinking of others. He was the same in Desert Storm. He ran into the line of fire for wounded friends. He earned a medal, but he never kept it. This revelation stunned everyone in the tea house. You didn't keep your medal? Young Stephen asked. Albert gave a bitter smile. I received it, but I never brought it home. I gave it to the families of my friends. The medal couldn't belong to me. They died. I lived. Marcus finally understood why Albert's house had no military items. He had given them all away to the families of the fallen medals, badges, mementos. Only memories remained with him. Uncle Albert, Thomas said. Those medals were yours, you earned them. Albert shook his head. No, Thomas. The real medal is here, he said, pointing to his heart. The memory of my friends. That never fades. That day they spoke for hours in the tea house. Desert Storm stories, lost comrades, the things they endured. For the first time in years, Albert felt relieved. He had shared his burden. He no longer carried the heavy memories alone. As people were leaving, Marcus spoke to Albert one last time. Uncle Albert, knowing you is a great privilege. You've taught me so much, not just about soldiering, but about humanity. And you've taught me a lot too, son, Albert replied. The past is not something to be hidden. Stories must be told. Experiences must be shared. You made that possible. From then on, Marcus visited the tea house every evening. Talking with Albert, listening to his memories, was a privilege. Each time he learned something new, not only war stories, but lessons about life itself. Uncle Albert, he said one evening, more people should know your story. These values must not be forgotten. Albert smiled. They already do, son. You started it, and now it will continue. What matters is keeping the stories alive. This was how the story came to light. A forgotten photo on the tea room wall. The sharp eyes of a curious SAS trainee. and the memories of a hero who had remained silent for 45 years. Albert was now the beloved hero of the tea house, yet he still drank his tea with the same modesty, read his newspaper, and gave the young quiet lessons in life. Silent heroes were all around us, your neighbor, someone from your street. Listening to them, valuing them, was our duty. As long as they lived, history lived. Marcus now looked at those around him differently. How many more Alberts were there? What stories lay hidden behind ordinary lives? On that first day, he had only gone for a cup of tea, but he had discovered a hero,